You're listening to the Family Podcast from PursueGOD.org.
Okay, parents, today we are going to tackle what I think is a very challenging topic, and it's about giving constructive criticism to your teenagers. So I'll be honest with you, I've had some successes and I've had some failures in this area. So I'm hopeful today that this topic will be helpful of giving you some do's and don'ts of how to talk to your teen about the things that they still need to grow and learn. Because let's be honest, what's so complicated is our teenagers think they're really smart. And in a lot of ways they are. But they also are still kids and they need our help and our mentorship. They need guidance. And that's part of our job as parents. You know, we talk about that in a lot of our parenting resources at Pursue God, that our goal is to help to train our kids up so that there will be a day that they're ready to enter the world at around 18 years old. Our goal as parents isn't to control and put the thumb over their heads and just try to force them to do things and then send them off into the world when they go to college or just move out, and then they're not equipped. They haven't been prepared along the way. So this topic is for any of you guys with teenagers out there, and maybe you've had more failures than successes recently. So hopefully this can be helpful. But at the end of the day, dealing with teenagers, they've got their own angst, their own emotional development, their own social peer pressures, things they're dealing with internally beyond just learning how to navigate relationship with mom and dad. And so as parents, we have to set the tone, right? We're the adults in the room, so we need to model as best we can, but still have to be the mentors, the people that speak the truth in love. So we need patience, we need understanding, and really, hopefully with today's information, a strategy that helps you to teach and train your teenager without totally destroying them or that they just shut down. Because here's the two things that typically happen. Most parents either fall into one of two categories. You're either the oversharer, the person that just lectures at your kids. So, something goes wrong, you're frustrated, they haven't been cleaning the room, they're not getting their homework done. You sit them down and you're like, son, daughter, here's the deal. You're not responsible. You keep failing in these things. What kind of a future are you going to have if you don't finish school? And we just talk at our kids. We lecture them. And some parents are like, okay, I don't want to be that. Maybe you had parents that just talked at you all the time. So you just then become like the silent parent. You don't really, the silent avoider, let's call it. You just are like, you know what? I just want to be my teenager's friend. They've got enough going on in their life. I don't want to add to the angst that they feel. So I'll just hope for the best. I just won't navigate that. I won't step into those conversations that could be hard and just hope that they figure it out themselves. Now, I don't know what category you're in. And then, of course, there's a combination, because I would say there's certainly been times where I've been the oversharer, lecturer, and there's been other times where I've been thinking to myself, I just don't know how to approach this conversation. So I've been afraid to approach it. And so I avoid it. So maybe you're the oversharer, maybe you're the avoider, maybe you're a combination of both. But as parents, like I said, we have to be the adults in the relationship, and we have to step into these conversations because our kids need our guidance and they're going to need constructive criticism along the way. So we're going to just establish some do's and some don'ts today. So the first do that we're going to talk about is just be kind, but clear. So when you have to sit your teenager down, let's say they have not been making curfew. And so you're going to sit them down and you want to be kind. Like, listen, I know you're going out, you're with your friends. It's easy to lose track of time, but this is an area where you need to earn our trust. And so when we give you a curfew and you don't follow the curfew, then there's a consequence, right? Now, we talk about this in some of our other parenting resources also, that you need to be really clear with your teenagers about what the rules are. It's not fair to move the goalposts and not be clear with your teen, like, this is your curfew, this is what we expect from you, this is, the chores that need to be done around the house. So if you haven't done that, make sure to have that conversation. Call a family meeting, be clear with your teenager what your expectations are. So when your teenager is bucking up against one of those things or failing in one of those areas, like to the curfew, you need to be kind but clear. Like, listen, this is a boundary. You know the boundary. We've been clear about what your curfew is and you've missed it. And this is an area where now you've lost our trust. So the consequence for that's going to be, you're not going out with friends next weekend. And, we'll try again the following weekend and see how you do. But the curfew is important and you need to follow the rules. But we need to be kind about it. We don't want to attack our teenager. We don't want to make them feel like a terrible person. We're trying to train them up in responsibility, right? That's going to be a future skill they need in the workplace. They're going to have to follow through on the expectations their boss has for them. So we're starting that process by teaching them, like, this is a rule, this is an expectation, you need to follow it. Ephesians 4:29 reminds us that we need to speak words that build each other up, right? We want to show kindness in our message. So that would be the first do for you parents. Let's be kind but clear with our feedback. Now, the second thing is, let's give our teens some space to process what maybe we've shared. For my kiddos, it might be, let's say, the way my son sometimes would talk to me with disrespect. So we'd sit down, we'd be kind but clear, like, hey, listen, buddy, I know you're trying to find your own voice, but you're not going to speak to your parents in a disrespectful way. And, we talk about what those boundaries are. But there were times with, let's say, our son on that topic that we would say, go take a couple days to kind of think about it. Think about where your heart is, why you get moody, why you get on edge, why, if it's me asking, did you get your homework done? Why is your reaction so severe sometimes and just fly off the handle and get frustrated? Give them a little bit of time to process. Again, especially to you parents that tend to be the oversharer, lecturer. How do you feel when people just come at you and just talking at you for minutes and hours on end, and then you never get a chance, A, to even process what's being said, but B, even have an opportunity to respond? So we want to give our teens some space to process the feedback that we've given them, recognizing that when someone has to give me hard feedback, my initial response might be defensiveness. So it's good for me to take some time before I say something. Let's give our teens that space to be like, hey, listen, I know this was a hard conversation, but this is important and we need to train you up in this area. So maybe go to your room or let's revisit this tomorrow night, and give your teens some space to process. Now, the third do is to keep earning trust, that with your teenager, the more time you spend with them, the more time you celebrate the things you love about them, that the more you build relationship with them by entering into the things that they care about, the more you're going to earn trust with them, that when you have to have these harder conversations, giving some hard feedback, they trust your heart is for them, not against them. I meet a lot of people who were raised in homes where parents were just authoritarian and controlling and critical. And it was just really hard to then feel like receiving any kind of feedback, because you just have to kind of guard your heart from their harshness. So parents, that's not who we want to be with our teenagers. We want to recognize that on the good days, especially when things are going well, and really honestly, in our family, we started as young as late elementary of just establishing a time in our week where we would have family time, where we would talk as a family, we would pray together. We used topics on PursueGOD.org and tried to bring in things happening on their sports team or with their friends, and just keeping Christ the center of our conversation, or seeing how the Bible applies. But we were earning trust with our kids in those conversations and in those times, so that when we ran up against some of the harder topics, our kids knew that we were for them, that we listened to them, that we cared about their perspective. So parents, these are the 3 do's that I want you to think about when you need to give the harder feedback, the constructive criticism to your teens. You need to be kind but clear. You need to give some space for them to process, especially if it's a harder conversation. And then you just need to recognize that every day is an opportunity to earn trust with your teenager. Go shopping with your daughter if that's what she loves to do. For me with my son, it was going on and just being a rebounder when he would just be out there shooting and practicing for basketball. Whatever that is for your kids, make sure that you're building trust with them so that when the harder conversations come, they're not defensive. They recognize that you're for them, not against them. Okay, now let's hit on some of the don'ts. And probably for all of us, this is what we need to pay more attention to. Parents, the first thing is we do not want to be passive aggressive. When we talk about trust building with our teens, they're smart. They can read between the lines. If we have subtle, veiled criticism, or we say something critical but couch it in a joke, If we're indirect, that is not building trust with our teenager. That makes them feel even worse. Like if we use sarcasm or, again, a veiled criticism that makes your teen feel like, wait, ouch, what you just said hurt, but you're saying it with a smile on your face. Like, let's not be passive aggressive. If we have something to say, remember, the first do is to be kind but clear. So if you've got a frustration with your teenager, it's better to come to them in kindness, but with clarity to say, hey, when you said this to me and use that tone of voice, that was hurtful and disrespectful, and that's not going to work. That's not the way it's going to be. Let's be direct with our feedback. The second thing is let's not be a nag. So again, this is really more for the oversharer, lecturing parent. If we are constantly criticizing and talking at our kids and pointing out only the things they're doing wrong, when are they going to have any space to hear you? They're just going to tune you out. And I think we've all probably realized that. For me, oh my gosh, I keep picking on my son, but he's a wonderful young man. But it would be like hanging up his clothes and cleaning his room. Like I just felt like it was just a constant thing with us. And I know that he just started to tune me out because I was a nag. He was just sick of hearing it. So parents, I think the better strategy for me would just be like, listen, back to our kind but clear and having like expectations. There should have just been a consequence. Instead of me nagging him and reminding him that your room is still a mess and your clothes are all over the floor and now they're going to be wrinkled, is to just say, hey, you know what? I walked downstairs today. Your room wasn't clean. Here's the consequence. Give me your phone, or you're not going to go out with your friends this weekend. Whatever that is for you. But when we nag and our constant criticism, we become kind of like that Snoopy voice, the want, right? Our kids just tune us out. So we need to choose our battles wisely. Like, let's make sure that when we need to give constructive criticism, let's make it count. So don't just always be nagging at your kids or constantly pointing out things, because that's just going to make them feel like, okay, there's nothing I can do to please you. So now I'm not going to care about your expectations or your rules or your feedback at all. I know that one's hard, parents, but the better strategy for not being the nag is going to just be like, be clear about your expectations and then have a consequence if it's not met. And then, of course, the third don't goes along with that. Like, just stop lecturing. Stop the long-winded lecturing. If you've got something to say it, and then let your teen also have an opportunity to respond and to share their perspective, and get to that place where you can say, at the end of the day, teen, this is going to be your life, and we're trying to train you to have the right skills, the right perspective, so that you can be a healthy adult that's ready to enter the world. But you have to take ownership of your choices. And parents, I think, especially for the lecturing, oversharing parent, we think that the best strategy is we just have to control our kids and protect them from their bad choices. And, there's a point to that to a certain degree, but the fundamental law of parenting that I talked about earlier is our job is not to control them so they don't ever learn ownership or learn that choices have consequences. Our job is to train them, to teach them along the way. So when you're giving some feedback, if there's been a failure or a missed expectation, then you need to speak to them in a way that's not just lecturing and here's all the things you did wrong, but to say, what would this look like if you were, in a job and you totally missed the deadline or you forgot to finish something and the project was delayed, and that means money to a company, right? Start to talk to them about, listen, this may seem small about hanging up your clothes that are all over the floor, but this is about training you about responsibility and following through on things and having attention to detail. So the more you can do to talk to your kids and apply it to real life, and even talk about it from your own perspective as a worker or experience that you've had in the workforce, like how important it is to learn responsibility, follow through, integrity. Those are things that you can teach and train your kids as you're giving them some harder feedback in an area where maybe they failed. But parents, at the end of the day, like I said, we're not doing our job well as parents if we're just lecturing and just throwing stuff at our kids and then just kind of forcing them into obedience. What we need to do is really build relationship, right? Build trust with them, be clear about our expectations, say it in kindness, but recognize that they need some space to process some of that stuff. Just like we need space to process when someone gives us feedback that doesn't feel so good. So let's look at our teens and as frustrating as they can be with their attitude and their moodiness, recognize that as the parents, our responsibility is to model the right kind of behavior so that they can grow, so that they can be independent. So pay attention to the do's, avoid those don'ts. And I pray and trust and know that your relationship with your teen can grow and you guys can have more peace than frustration and disappointment in your relationship.
Thanks for listening. If you would like to give to help support our ministry, please visit PursueGOD.org/donate. Find more resources to talk about these topics with your small group, family, or mentor on PursueGOD.org.